Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores!
Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks.
Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into a Thursday edition of Gamecock Pod Live for November the 7th, episode number 1621, where I'm battling a little bit of a cold, but we will push on nonetheless, and we have a great show on store or in store on tap for you today with my good friends. That's right, plural. I actually have more than one, from thebigspur.com, John Whittle and Alex Jones. John will be joining us off the top in just a couple of minutes. Today's show is brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte, Fort Mill, Rock Hill, Lancaster, Lincolnton, Mount Holly, Denver, Concord, you name it, area. Nana's Porch, your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or the big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue. Now that the weather is finally cooling off, even out here in Texas, it's cooling off. And I got to say, if you could combine the big backyard bash with a whole hog barbecue along with an oyster roast and have steamed oysters and pulled pork barbecue and some sides and plenty of ice cold beer. Have your fire pit outside. Have a fire if it's getting down in the low 50s, upper 40s at night, watching a football game outside. That's real living. And now, when you go to nanasporch.com, NANASPORCH.com, you can also order the award-winning pimento cheese, both the smoky jalapeno and the great regular flavor. Last year voted both number 1 and number 2 in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. If you live in the Carolinas and you order it today, you'll get it in time for South Carolina and Vanderbilt on Saturday for your watch party. If you're going up on Friday, unless you live in the Charlotte area where you can go and buy it at one of the stores up there in person, probably out of luck. But this is there's 4 games left this month of football season. And my good friend Chris Payne has been donating $1 from every container of pimento cheese sold to the North Carolina Fraternal Order of Police over in Statesville, North Carolina, for their great work and relief efforts in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene and just that devastated area of Western North Carolina. And so order extra It's a great addition to any watch party or any tailgate. Go to nanasporch.com and order your pimento cheese this month, all month. $1 from every container will go to the North Carolina Fraternal Order of Police. You'll love it. I guarantee it. And we bring in our good friend John Whittle as before he's been gracious enough to join us before he heads down to the port city today for the Gamecocks' final fall scrimmage against what I'm sure is a good friend of his and Chad Holbrook, former Gamecock baseball coach, two-time national championship assistant baseball coach, now the head coach at the College of Charleston. John, how you doing, and what's the weather forecast for tonight's scrimmage at Riley Park?
Well, it rained all day yesterday and all evening, and supposed to rain for a little while today down there, but it's supposed to clear up a little afternoon. So it'll probably be a little damp down there, but otherwise it should be fine. So, they're not gonna worry about trying to move this thing or anything like that. Too much has gone into it, so they'll give it a shot tonight and see where it goes.
All right, well, great to have you with us. And so first, I just got to get your impressions of being in the press box Saturday night at Williams-Brice Stadium. And the Gamecocks once again go right out the gate strong, 14-0. A&M comes back, takes the lead at 20-17. Gamecocks get those penalties right before they kick the field goal to tie it at 20-20. But John, what an unbelievable night in Williams-Brice. How does it rank amongst the nights you've been inside Williams-Brice?
Well, I've been in the stands for a lot of great games over the years. Now this one, being in the press box, you lose a lot of that. Just to be honest, it's an enclosed environment. There's a couple little windows that are open at the top that might be open about a foot. So you don't really get the environment in there from a crowd standpoint. But the press box was swaying like it doesn't usually do very often. It certainly seemed like an incredible environment. It was, and from start to finish too, the only time you could see some empty seats in the bleachers over in the student section was when everybody was pushing forward to try to get onto the field after the game. So, it was certainly a special night.
No doubt about it. I talked to a friend of mine from Florence who's 74 years old. He's been going to games since he was 12. He said by far it was the best environment he had ever been a part of. And I can believe it, the way the Gamecocks played. Not only the first half, but John, just a dominating second half performance. Gamecocks shut them out 20-0. A&M only 25 rushing yards in the second half. As it started to unfold and the end was drawing near, I did not have that on my bingo card. No sacks for the offense, which we'll talk about Lenora Sellers in a minute, but just overall, your perspective and your thoughts on the magnitude of that win.
Yeah, and I think it should be said with regard to environment, there's probably been some bigger games and wins that were more unexpected that have come through that place over the years. But I think as much flack as Ray Tanner gets for so many things that folks think have gone wrong, they've created a really nice spectacle over there beyond just the football piece of it. You have, I mean, it's a night game, so that's obviously helpful, but you got the light show going off. You've got tremendous videos from the creative media team, cinematic type stuff to, get fans fired up and ready to go. You've got the fireworks going off. You've got the fire out there during these in between action presentation type things. Like they've created something over there that helps the environment as well. So, I mean, the credit goes to the fans, but I think it should be mentioned as well that the administration has done a really nice job too in helping to create an environment and keep those fans engaged throughout the entire time. But as far as the on-field stuff goes, for sure, like Lenore Sellers obviously played the best game of his career. Defense has done what it has done all year long. They forced some turnovers. They weren't getting. I didn't think they got to the quarterback particularly well early in that game. Cause the defensive backs, linebackers to have to hold coverage a little bit longer than they've had to all year. I thought early in the game, the linebackers got beat a couple of times in pass coverage, but it was mainly because of how long that they were trying to have to hold some of that coverage. So, but as the game went on, South Carolina made some adjustments defensively and started getting to the quarterback a little bit more. Dylan Stewart was obviously phenomenal. I think he was credited with 9 quarterback pressures or hurries. It was just what you expect from South Carolina's defense at this point in the season. So, I love the way they played really from start to finish. They had a couple little blips in the second quarter, but you know what, that happens. And, it was, I thought it was a great performance basically from beginning to end.
No doubt. And so I have to say, I thought, and I've been critical, I think we've all been critical of Dow Loggins. I thought by far that's the best game he's called as a play caller at South Carolina. But you also had Lenore Sellers, John, who, all credit to our mutual friend Dave Cloninger from the Post and Courier, the first question in the post game about what was different for him. And Lenore said for the first time all year, the game slowed down for him. And that's great news for Gamecock fans. And I think that's really bad news for the rest of South Carolina's opponents.
Yeah.
But talk about the plays he made early in that game. I mean, A&M had open guys running untouched at him, and he made a miss or at times would shake off 1 or 2 guys and make play after play after play.
Yeah, I mean, it was the second play of the game where it was, I think he was an unblocked rusher, just came straight up the middle, and Sellers just somehow got out of it. I don't know how it worked. Like, there was a pocket around him. There were a whole bunch of guys around him, and then all of a sudden he's just standing up in there. So I don't know how he was able to do that so many times. I mean, I know that's like part of his skill set, right? Like that's part of why he was recruited and why he was so valued and why he was so heavily talked up coming into this year. Like that's a big part of his game. But at the same time, it's like you're taking on some of the best defensive linemen and linebackers in the college football world, and you're just making them miss. So it was a really impressive performance by him, and we hadn't really seen a lot of that, or we haven't seen a full game of that just yet. I mean, I think we were on our way to seeing that against LSU, and then he obviously got hurt. He was having one of those games where he was just playing lights out that day. And, but part of it too is, he's just getting more time out there and more experience. And, that's and I think similar can be said about South Carolina offensively. Now, you don't want to wait until game 8 for things to, or game 7 for things to like really come together like that. After 7 games for things to really start to come together like that. But you had to know it was going to take a little bit of time, right? Like 9 of these guys who started the opening game this year were first-time starters, and 7 of these guys weren't even on the team last year. So, anyone who thought that South Carolina was just going to start out offensively, just clicking on all cylinders with a whole new offense and a quarterback who had never started before, that was just unreasonable. So, I'm a little bit disappointed that it's taken this long for the entire offense to get to where it is right now. But, at the same time, at least they're going now. And, it was probably set back both the offense and Lenore's by him being injured against LSU and then missing the Akron game. And then, spending more time in the training room than the practice field during the first bye week. And, now that you've had your second bye week, I think you're starting to see some of the fruits of just being out there enough.
No doubt. So the offensive line had a great game. South Carolina, 286 rushing yards, 2 100-yard rushers. Lenoris, first quarterback to rush for over 100 yards in a conference game since Corey Jenkins, who was an NFL linebacker, did in 2002 against Georgia. And Rocket Sanders looked like Rocket Sanders, and I really liked and have been begging all year for more off-tackle runs. And we saw that. I mean, he still bounced 1 or 2 outside. He's got great vision, but they used some different schemes, pin and pull in particular, that worked really well. And on the long touchdown run, on the hurry up, they really caught Texas A&M. It was a thing of beauty.
Yeah, I thought the offensive line played really, really well in when it comes to the run game. Obviously, we talked about how Lenoris has had to use some of his skill set to escape some things from a pass standpoint, but you know what, that happens when you play in the SEC, and against good defensive lines. Like, they're going to beat you sometimes too. So, that's where having a quarterback like Lenoris, instead of having 3 or 4 sacks, it becomes 0 sacks. So it's, I thought the offensive line did a great job in the run game. Like, so many times you watch them and there's like no hole, or they're getting hit 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Like the other night, there were options for running backs. There were multiple holes. There was a lot of room out there for Rocket or Lenoris, and even Oscar Attaway got free a couple of times. I thought he had one of his better games and did okay from a blocking standpoint too. So, but they were obviously riding Lenoris and Rocket for much of that game, as much as they could. So, but I was really impressed with what South Carolina was able to do up front, especially in the run game. But that was certainly their best game of the year.
No doubt about it. So, to me, if there is a concerning area on the offense, it is still at the wide receiver position. Even though the Gamecocks had a season-high 530 yards of total offense, wide receivers had a total of 20 yards in receptions, and wide receivers not named Mazio Bennett had a total of 1 yard in receptions. How concerning is that? Jared Brown getting back in the mix, how big could that be? And no Vandrevis Jacobs, and I thought Nicholas Harbor really just was not impressive after that big catch against Alabama. I was just hoping that could be a catalyst for him. Your thoughts on that position?
Yeah. I mean, obviously it isn't what you wanted, but it certainly seems to me like South Carolina made a decision to put their best guys outside of receiver this past week. That would be best from a blocking standpoint. It was pretty obvious that they were going, run heavy with Lenoris and Rocket, and wanted to have some of their best guys on the perimeter from a blocking standpoint. That doesn't minimize, these guys were brought in as wide receivers. Like Gage Larvidane played almost every snap, and like he was brought in to make plays. Like he was brought in to take the top off of defense. He was brought in because he's had 4 years of production at the college level. Like he wasn't brought in to block. He was brought in to catch the football, and he had one catch. Jared Brown was supposed to be a guy who could be a big yards after catch guy. He didn't do anything offensively. So yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. Like it's a concern, and that can't happen very often because, Rocket Sanders isn't going to go out there, and defenses aren't going to let him, catch 5 passes for 92 yards. Defenses aren't going to let Josh Simon catch 4 balls for 132 yards when they don't think your receivers are worth a damn. So that's going to be an adjustment that Vanderbilt's and whoever else ahead, make, or that's something they're going to pay close attention to. Now, Josh Simon's going to be able to get his, and Rocket's going to get his, but they're going to need help from that wide receiver position too. And obviously South Carolina tried a couple of deep balls to Nick Harbor, and the second one especially, it's like, what is going on out there? I think that just kind of shows all the fans who are just saying, hey, just put him out there and just tell him to run on down the field and just throw it to him. He'll catch it. And I think that kind of puts an end to that a little bit, right? Like it's not always that easy. But that was disappointing. Not necessarily that he didn't get either of those 2 balls, but the second one especially just didn't look right in terms of trying to play it. The timing of his leap, like nothing was right there. So, I think that kind of shows why most, not all, but most of his catches are kind of those crossers across the middle or quick outs or whatever they have been. But South Carolina just has to keep getting better at that position. And they need to be a little bit better throughout the course of the year. And then, I think it shows why they're recruiting so many guys in the class right now at wideout. They just need more and better players in that room. And, they're doing it from a high school recruiting standpoint right now, and they're probably going to do it through the portal with a guy or 2 this offseason.
Yeah, it's almost like Ma, the meatloaf. We want it now.
I get it. And it should be better than what it is. Like right now, it should be better than what it is. But it's not. So, you've got to figure out ways to work around it. And South Carolina was able to do that this past game with Rocket and Josh. And, Vanderbilt's gonna be sure to try to take that away or focus on that. And, then you've got to make your next adjustment. If you're Dowell Loggins, maybe it's the quick hitter outside screen. I know Vandy plays a lot of off coverage and gives you the short stuff. And, maybe you're able to make a play out there, make a guy miss. Maybe this is a Jared Brown type of game because that's what he's supposed to be good at. So, we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. But you're right in that wide receiver position just hasn't been good enough this year. And, this is the most glaring spot to it.
No doubt. So, John, about the only thing that's uglier than that last play, from Lenoris to Nick Harbor is early November college basketball. That is ugly. I mean, I'm watching that game. I'm watching the women's game. It's making my eyes hurt. I mean, I'm surprised both backboards didn't have to be changed at halftime. There were so many bricks and just god-awful looking plays, but it's all about the money. They shouldn't be playing this early. I don't care what they say about the summer or early start to practice. It's just ugly, and you see team after team after team losing games to opponents like North Florida. And hey, Matt Driscoll's a friend of mine, all the way back to when he was at Clemson with Larry Shyack in the 90s, when we were young and he had more hair than me, and he still got more hair than me, but not as much as he used to have. But, I mean, what was that like, watching that in person? I mean, did it make your heart hurt?
It was awful. I mean, I don't know, like, when I don't know if starting basketball season later would really necessarily help play, because, I mean, they're here all summer now, and you've got August, September, October to get ready for a season. You just got to play better. I mean, you just have to play better. I mean, you're not trying to get 11 guys on the same page on offense and 11 guys on the same page on defense. You got 5 guys who are out there, they're playing ball, and you know, I don't think timing is a big deal. You just, like, South Carolina's best players played really, really poorly in the first half, and only a little better in the second half, maybe some of them. I don't know. Like, I'm not somebody who questions effort, like, very often. I'm not on the bench. I'm not in the huddle. I don't know who, but I do think in basketball, it's a little bit more evident when you're not playing as hard as the other team, and individuals aren't playing as hard as maybe they should. You see it in rebounding. You see it in boxing out. You see it in guys, you know, whether they're going to dive on the court or whether they're not. You see it on the defensive end, obviously, when a guy gets beat, or if you're able to keep a guy in front of you. And South Carolina just wasn't playing hard enough. I mean, to me, that at the end of the day, that's what it was. I mean, there were certainly some missed shots around the rim that you certainly expect to go in, and maybe they do later. But, you know, for me, I left that game thinking effort more than anything else. I mean, excuse me, there was a time where a ball was kind of rolling towards Arden Conyers, and, you know, he bent down to pick it up, and North Florida guy just dove right in front of him and, you know, took the ball. And, like, that's not what you can have happen. And, you know, it just was a really poorly played game, but also a really poorly game when it came to effort.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you got outshot from the doubled up behind the 3-point line. South Carolina made 5. They made 10. But even then, you miss 11 free throws and you lose by 3. In spite of all of that, I mean, 18 for 25 shouldn't be a big stretch from the free throw line. I mean, that's...
Yeah, and
they go at 14.
You know, I'm probably wrong in this, because so many people hold a opinion different than mine. But, you know, I don't get crazy upset about, you know, a overall free throw percentage for a team. Like, Nick Pringle shot shitty from the free throw line. Like,
He
that's
was
it.
not good.
Like,
Yeah.
he was 3 for 8. If you take out his 3 for 8, South Carolina's not great, but fine from the free throw line. Like, is Colin Murray Boyles going to be your best free throw shooter? Probably not. He was 3 for 6. That's not great. If he hits 4 for 6, which is probably more in line with what his percentage is going to be, then, that changes things a little bit. I mean, Cam Scott's not going to be 100% free throw shooter. You want him to hit more than 1 for 3. But there's going to be games where he goes 1 for 3. There's going to be games where he goes 7 for 8. I mean, that's just kind of what a percentage is. And I mean, yeah, like South Carolina lost because it didn't make enough free throws this game, but it's Nick Pringle who has to get better. It's not a referendum for me on South Carolina's free throw shooting that Nick Pringle sucks at shooting free throws. So, he can't be in the game at end of games if that's going to continue to be an issue. But I can't sit here and say I just don't believe that South Carolina lost the game because Nick Pringle missed too many free throws in the first half. Like, they've got to play better down the stretch and make some shots down the stretch and get defensive stops down the stretch. And they need to shoot better as a team from the free throw line. But, it was really one guy who threw off that percentage that much.
All right, John, great stuff. I know you got to get on the road. We'll look forward to getting you back on, hopefully, to wrap up fall baseball and talk some more hoops. And hopefully it will be a November to remember for Gamecock football. Safe travels, my friend, and always great to get a chance to talk Gamecock sports with you.
Yeah, and hopefully we don't have more basketball games like this one to talk about, because this is going to be a heavy weight on South Carolina for a long time. Like, you got to go out there and win some big games to get rid of this. But this is probably a quad 4 loss on the resume. Maybe North Florida ends up being okay, and maybe it's a quad 3 loss, but I don't see that happening. It's probably a quad 4 loss, and that is going to be something that South Carolina has to deal with for a long time. And you can't lose more than one game like that. It's a drain on you enough when you lose one. You've lost any kind of margin for error. I talk about margin for error a good bit when it comes to losses in basketball and baseball. Like, there's a certain amount of non-conference games you can lose, but it's not many, and you've already done it. You've already hit your quota for bad losses for basketball after just one game.
No doubt. So, the good news is there's 30 more to go. So
yeah, you're right. You're 100% right on that. So, but we'll talk about it again soon. Appreciate you having me on, Keith.
Absolutely, John. All right, that was the venerable one, John Whittle from the Big Spur. And now it's 2 for Thursday as we go to Alex Jones from the Big Spur. Alex, in all of your 60-plus years of watching Gamecock football, how was that environment, Williams-Brice Stadium, for you? Or I guess you were behind the glass in the press box too. And still, though, what a night in Williams-Brice Stadium.
Yeah, that was an incredible environment, and you could really feel it pregame. Like, when I pulled up the park, you can see like it was already a huge crowd that was there. When we go down for Gamecock Walk, I mean, that was one of the bigger Gamecock walks I've seen, and it was really cool having the flyover with that too. And you could just feel the energy, and I think you could feel like there was a chance something could happen in Williams-Brice Stadium that night. And in the press box, you don't get the full environment just because it's so insulated up there, but you still hear just how loud it was, especially on that O'Donnell Fortune interception. Like, that place was loud. And I know everybody who wasn't at the game could hear it on TV too. Like I think ABC did a great job of showcasing that environment. You could really just feel the energy in that stadium.
I mean, it's like ABC is like being at a movie theater watching it on IMAX. And CBS was like being in the little small movie theater with the small screen and like 3 rows at the bottom and 4 rows at the top. I mean, it's just a huge difference. And I thought it was amazing. South Carolina jumped right on them. And by the way, can we just go ahead and say, hey, fans, stop bitching about the Gamecocks wearing all black uniforms, okay? I was on the sideline before the game last year against Kentucky, all black, okay? Phenomenal environment. Okay, phenomenal. Gamecocks win. Last Saturday night, ironic, Texas A&M the weekend before for the first time ever. Excuse me, I'm about a little bit of a cold. They wear black, all black at night. And I have to say, I thought the script Aggie's black helmet was sweet. But there's nothing like a blackout at Williams-Brice Stadium at night now with the light show and everything else. AT says they have definitely exercised that uniform demon. Yeah. I agree, but the most emphatic win against a top 10 team wearing all black, 44-20. Shane Beamer owns the 2 most emphatic home wins over top 10 teams over Tennessee, 63-38, and Texas A&M, 44-20. It's kind of what's in the uniforms. It's not the uniforms, right, Alex?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that you pretty much nailed it on the head there. Like they, have been really playing well. And you think about, I think there's just some of those bigger games in those all black uniforms, I think just kind of resonate with South Carolina where they didn't play. I think you think about, I think it was 2017 Kentucky. Maybe they did the all black uniforms and did not play well in that one. So I think it's just a few games that people remember in those uniforms and just don't want them. But as you mentioned, South Carolina's been pretty good in them here recently.
No doubt. So let me rattle off these players and I want you to tell me what they all have in common. Mazio Bennett, Josiah Thompson, Fred J.R. Johnson, David Busey, Dylan Stewart, Lenora Sellers, Michael Smith, Vandrevis Jacobs, and Bakari Swain. What all those guys have in common?
Pretty much in their first year playing a lot at South Carolina.
They're all Craig,
either freshmen or redshirt freshmen.
They're all freshmen or redshirt freshmen, and this was a huge recruiting weekend at South Carolina. And with an unmatched environment, Alex, and I got to credit Dow Loggins, clearly the best game he's ever had as a play caller. But I thought a lot of that was because number 16 kind of stepped out of the phone booth wearing the cape. I mean, John and I talked about it, second play of the game. They have a guy looping free right up the middle, coming right at him like a cruise missile. And he just pulled a maverick and just hit the brakes and let him fly right by and took off, hit Rocket Sanders down the sideline. I mean, what a huge performance from him, from Rocket Sanders, from Joshua Simon, the offensive line, 286 yards rushing and 530 yards of total offense. I mean, I don't even know if they've had 400 against anybody in conference, let alone 500 against maybe the best defense, along probably with Georgia in the SEC.
Yeah, that's the craziest part about this is I think, coming into this game, you wonder like, all right, can South Carolina do enough offensively to keep up? So I think you thought A&M was going to find a way to get points, even though you had faith in South Carolina's defense to be able to make some plays and get some stops. But it's just an incredible all-around performance. And it starts with Lenora Sellers, too. Like, he was by far his best game. And, going into that one, I kind of thought a healthy bye week for him was going to be really big because he didn't have that going into that Ole Miss game. He was injured and still working to get back 100%. But then, having that healthy bye where he can kind of look, build on what the good that he did previously and then, work on some of the bad things he's been doing. And he was awesome. And
sorry about that, Alex. I hit the wrong button. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was just saying that, Lenoris looked awesome. I mean, I think one of the things that really stood out to me about him in that game was his decision making. It seemed like he really had, he would get back in the pocket and make a 1-2 quick reads, and then if it wasn't there, he was going. And he was going to either make a play, rolling out to the right or left, or he was going to run. So I thought his decision making was really, really good. And I think this is going to be a game where South Carolina's going to have that maybe can set the tone offensively for the rest of the year. You have to think that Vanderbilt, sees that, I imagine Vanderbilt's goal is going to be to stop the run early in this game and make Lenoris beat them through the air. But I think Lenoris can do that. He's shown signs that he can do that. And I thought it was just an overall really good performance offensively.
I mean, no doubt it was special. I thought the second half on defense was special. And so AT in the Nana Sports chat box says it's going to be hard to replace the talent on D leaving the season. Do you think reinforcements are being recruited in the portal addressed to minimize production drop-off? Well, on the portal, we're getting ready to get to recruiting AT. I agree there are a lot of dudes that are leaving. But, I don't think anybody thought Kyle Kennard or Demetrius Knight were going to come in and set the world on fire like they have, or DeAndre Jules or Monkel Goodwine, Jules before he got injured, right? And so Craig says, wrong, we have the best defense in the SEC. Well, we certainly have one of the best defenses in the SEC. And Craig with a great comment, the defense has given up just 22 second half points in the last 4 games. And I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah. The second half adjustments have been really on point defensively this year. They really, the first halves they've been pretty good too, but they've really come into the locker room at halftime, and Clayton White, Torian Gray, and Sterling Lucas, all those guys have come in and really made the adjustments to what they've seen in the offense, in the first half and adjusted to it. And it's been, this defense just continues. They've been really good, but I think they continue to get better too. The more and more they play, and that front is just so disruptive and has been against the best offensive lines they're going to face. And that's going to be key this weekend against Vanderbilt. But, kind of back to your point earlier about what they're losing. Yeah, there is a lot that they're going to be losing. I think you have to imagine now that TJ Sanders is going to be gone. I think he has a chance to be a high draft pick. Nick Emman worries, seeing his name pop up, first round pick potentially. I think he has that potential. So a lot to replace. But as you kind of mentioned, they found some guys in the portal this past offseason that maybe flew under the radar a little bit, but they've developed them and come in and they've made an impact. So you have to hope that happens again for South Carolina next year.
No doubt about it. And so, plus there's a lot of young players on this team, right? Like there's Fred J.R. Johnson. Okay. Mo Kaba, even though he's not a young player, he's got multiple years of eligibility left. And I think they're trying to get him going. You got Desmond Umeozulu coming back. I'm assuming, I don't know, maybe he's out for an injury. Elijah Davis, maybe they're redshirting him. I think they're trying to redshirt Nick Barrett. JT Gear really turned it on against Oklahoma and played well at Alabama. Brian Thomas Jr. comes back. It's not just Dylan Stewart.
Yeah.
But this was a great opportunity. It was a showcase game, much like that Tennessee game 2 years ago, which really spearheaded South Carolina's 2024 signing class. Am I right? Or 2023? No, I guess 24, because it's most all those guys, Wendell Gregory, all those guys committed, Michael Smith, all those guys committed in January. Josiah Thompson, Cam Pringle, big offensive lineman from Greenville. Mazio had already, he flipped from Tennessee. All those guys committed early and really gave Carolina momentum, and Dylan Stewart committed, and everybody held their breath, and it was like, nah, man, I'm coming to South Carolina. Well, they already have a top 20 type of class, but they've really got an opportunity to close strong. First, let's talk about the two most recent commitments from 25 and the 26 commitment, cornerback Peyton Dyer. But your thoughts on Jordan Gidron, who reclassified and committed to South Carolina, and then Dutch Fork linebacker Josh Smith, as expected, committed to Gamecocks on Tuesday. What do you like about those guys?
Yeah, Jordan Gidron's a guy who's going to bring a lot of speed to South Carolina in that wide receiver. I mean, he's a guy who, runs track and is really good at track. And, I think he's one to, brings a little bit of size too. That's something that you talk about with the wide receiver. I mean, just need a little bit more size there, and they're going to bring that. And this wide receiver class that they have so far has been really, really good. Or it's going to be really, really good. And they're still got some targets out there. And, I think with Jordan Gidron, he's a guy who, in-state guy that Mike Ferry really developed a strong relationship with. And I think we're starting to see Mike Ferry's, recruiting chops, because he's really kind of turned that receiver room with this class. And then with Josh Smith, he's a guy who they've been recruiting for a little while now, but really kind of turned it up here. He's having a really strong season, playing linebacker at Dutch Fork. And, he's a guy who, had Ole Miss really coming after him too. He visited Ole Miss, and, NC State was right up there too. But, they've been really good at keeping these type of guys in state, and he's just another one of these physical guys that South Carolina, that Clayton White really looks for at linebacker, and he's a guy who, is going to be got a chance to maybe continue rising the rankings with the way he's been playing this season at Dutch Fork.
I mean, no doubt. I don't really get all that fired up about guys that commit 2 years before they're going to sign that are not from in-state. But I will say Peyton Dyer, I'm putting an asterisk by his name, because he goes to high school in Duluth, Georgia, and just happens to be at the same school as Georgia Tech 4-star offensive tackle commitment Demola Ajdahan, who's 6'6", 290, and I mean, he kind of looks a lot like Josiah Thompson when you look at him. Long, lean, long arms, just like you'd draw him up. And so let's stick a pin in that. There's a couple uncommitted guys, Donovan Murph, and then the Gamecocks on Monday offered former Tennessee outside linebacker or edge, who went there, redshirted, went to JUCO. He's out in Kansas. Shandavian Bradley. I know the Gamecocks are working on getting him on campus for an official visit. And then Christian Ingram, a late riser, a defensive tackle from Covington, Georgia. He's visiting for the Wofford game. Those are three uncommitted guys. Where do the Gamecocks stand with those guys, in your opinion?
Yeah, with Murph, I think they're in a really good spot right now. He officially visited this past weekend, and there's pictures on social media of him kind of hanging out with those Gamecock, the other receiver commits, and I know Mike Furry and all of them. Saw him, talking to him throughout the official visit, and I think South Carolina's put themselves in a pretty good spot. He does have a Clemson official visit here in a few weeks, I think, for the Citadel game. But, I think South Carolina is right there and put themselves in a really good spot to land a commitment from Donovan Murph. And, with Shane Davian Bradley, he's a guy who, in the high school recruiting, it was really South Carolina and Tennessee were kind of battling out for him. And Sterling Lucas had him in it, but then he ended up Shane Davian Bradley ended up going to Tennessee. But so I think you have to think Sterling Lucas has had a strong relationship with him. So South Carolina's is probably right there in that recruitment right now offering, and they knew what he can do. And I think it's just, they like his potential, and South Carolina's seems to have a good chance there, especially with their relationship that Sterling Lucas has. And then with Ingram, he's a guy who's kind of, as you mentioned, a late riser in this class, but a guy that's got, a lot of interest right now. I think Georgia has offered and Kentucky's offered. And, when those two schools and those coaching staffs are offering defensive players, I think the potential of those guys. So I think he maybe is going to be a little bit of a battle just to continue to, there's a chance South Carolina can get him, but it's going to be a battle just because of, all the schools that are really getting in on him right now.
No doubt. All right, so let's talk about Flip. It's Flip season. We used to talk about Will Muschamp as a flipper, but let's start in Columbia with tight end Mike Tyler, who's kind of one of the more bizarre recruitments, right? Like it looked like South Carolina, and then the summer, all contact just seemed to stop, and all of a sudden he was committed to LSU. Then he shows up for the South Carolina LSU game. Then he's like, wow. Then he's come back. I think Saturday was his third game. Gamecocks cut loose their tight end commitment from this class. There have been a lot of crystal balls and RPMs on that other side for Mike Tyler, the Gamecocks. Is this just a matter of when more than if he ends up in the class?
Yeah, South Carolina's worked really hard to flip Mike Tyler, and you kind of mentioned it was an interesting recruitment. It seemed like there's a lot of interest on both sides early on, and then kind of in the summer it seemed obviously that things cooled because committed to LSU, but I think his final three was LSU, West Virginia, and I can't remember who the other one was, but it wasn't South Carolina, and so you wonder and so you like, well, yeah, things did cool off there, but things have really ramped up now with him, and he's being a local guy, it's an easy trip for him, from Hammond to come to South Carolina to visit for games. And there's obviously a lot of interest because he's been to, as you mentioned, 3 games, I think, so far. So obviously there's a lot working right here. And it seems like South Carolina's right there and got a good chance to pull off a flip here.
And he's yet to take an official visit to South Carolina. Is that correct?
I believe so. I believe that's correct. Yes.
All right, so Damola Ajdahan, who we just talked about, he has taken an official visit. He's been committed to Georgia Tech since the summer. He also just took an official visit to Ohio State, and then he's back at South Carolina. And then his teammate commits to the Gamecocks. His high school coach has got a connection to George Rogers, who played at Duluth, from Duluth, Georgia. By the way, the greatest player ever to wear the garnet and black and the only Heisman Trophy winner. Yep. And I saw him play. I know a lot of you younger folks didn't. I mean, I'm not asking you to give away state secrets, but I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, I mean, there is a one outstanding welcome home out there. On a scale of 1 to 10, Damola Ajdahan, how confident are you that he ends up in the class?
I mean, if you follow the visits on this one, I mean, I think you have to put it up there. I mean, maybe a 7 or 8. And the only reason I probably wouldn't go higher is just because of the interest he's getting. And I think you have to account for Georgia Tech too. Like Brent Key knows what he's looking for in offensive lineman, and he's still committed and hasn't decommitted. So you can't rule out that possibility either. But we always say follow the visits, and you can definitely follow this one and see there's legit interest in South Carolina. So with him, I think there's still a little bit of work to do just to fend off, maybe Ohio State, or work to get him, see if you can get him decommitted from Georgia Tech. But, I mean, he's obviously if you follow the visits, there's serious interest on both sides here.
No doubt about it. So he's not the only Georgia Tech offensive line commitment South Carolina's after. So Jimmy Bryson, who just happens to play for a guy I'm friends with, who threw that ball known as the fade against Mississippi State, Eric Kimry at the Baylor School in Chattanooga. Jimmy Bryson, 6'4", 265, 285. He's going to have to get bigger. He's a center. South Carolina needs a center. Rashawn Lee his time is up. And then Gamecocks make an offer to Lancaster Shrine Bowler Kevin P., 6'4", 296, who is going to make his official visit next weekend for the Missouri game. I mean, is Lonnie Teasley going to pull off the hat trick here?
You have to wonder what Georgia Tech's thinking with South Carolina potentially taking three offensive lineman commits for him. And, with Jimmy Bryson, he's a guy who, as you mentioned, center is a spot that, South Carolina's recruited really well offensive line, but I think center is a spot when you look at the depth for the next few years. They're going to need one because you think you got Ryan Brubaker at center, but Torres Simpkins is probably your second center right now, but he's going to be gone after this year. So you're going to need a guy like Jimmy Bryson, and he's one who, he came in for that official visit this past weekend, but was also in for an unofficial for the Ole Miss game. And, he talked to, obviously, Hale McGranahan after, and it sounds like a final decision could be coming here in the next few weeks. He is going to visit Georgia Tech this upcoming weekend, so I think you have to watch that just to see, does he stick with Georgia Tech, just being loyal with them? But, I mean, it's obviously saying, I keep saying this with a lot of these guys, but keep following the visits with these guys. And, I mean, for him to come to an unofficial visit for that Ole Miss game and then come back for an official, there's interest there. And, I think with him and Kevin P., South Carolina's recruited in-state offensive linemen really well. And with P., I think they got a good shot there too, just because of, Lonnie Teasley's track record and those guys of locking down in-state offensive linemen. So I still think there's a little bit of work to do with those guys, just to see all three of them really, just to see if you can get them the decommit from Georgia Tech. But, they've put themselves in a really good spot to end the cycle strong on the offensive line.
No doubt about it. All right, so there are going to be heavy losses on the defensive side of the ball. So I like where the Gamecocks are with Murph. I like where the Gamecocks are with Tyler. Obviously, he's seeing what Joshua Simon's doing. I think those two. I mean, you never want to count out Clemson, but look, Clemson for a noon or 1 o'clock kick against the Citadel versus Texas A&M at night, no contest. As long as they can keep Donovan Murph away from the church up there, I think they'll be in good shape. But on defense, Kelton McHale, defensive tackle, said he wanted to sleep on it. Said South Carolina and Georgia, even though he's been committed to Liberty. And then another junior college tackle who I want to get to because that was in Ed asked about him in the chat box. Xavier Hardy, former Gamecock commitment, but that was Jimmy Lindsey. It's Travian Robertson's the new sheriff in town. Now, Mississippi State, that came out of nowhere, and they are having a really bad year. I do like the Gamecocks to get McHale if they really want him. But what about Xavier Hardy? And your thoughts on McHale as well?
Yeah, with Xavier Hardy, it's really been interesting, kind of his recruitment. South Carolina, he was committed to South Carolina and ended up going to East Mississippi, and it was kind of quiet on the South Carolina front with where they stood, and that Mississippi State commitment kind of came out of nowhere. But he was in this weekend, and I think there's still a lot of interest, and I think there's a good chance South Carolina can work him back into this classic. When you think when we talk about the depth of this team next year, where the spots need, like if you're a JUCO defensive lineman, I think you're looking at this. What South Carolina's losing, there's a lot of potential for playing time. I mean, so with him, I think there's probably still some work to do. I don't think a final decision from him is really close. I think it's going to take a little while into that signing period, but I think South Carolina's got themselves in the spot to be able to land him. And with Mike Keldon, I think I like South Carolina's chances right there. Sounds like he's committed to Liberty right now, but I don't think he's going to end up there. He still has Georgia right there too, but Travian Robinson's done a really good job in this recruitment of getting South Carolina in the game for one, but then putting themselves in a spot where they got a really good chance to land him. And I think I like their chances right now, right there.
I mean, no doubt. So Gamecocks and Auburn came down to the wire this summer for, at the time, 5-star defensive end Jared Smith, Alabaster, Alabama. Auburn seemed to, gain some momentum later in that recruitment. I think the Yellowwood NIL was probably part of that, but he just got to witness Vanderbilt beat Auburn in Jordan-Hare Stadium for the first time in history. And I'm pretty sure he was there to watch them get beat by Cal at home to open the season and some other teams, because basically Hugh Freeze and Auburn have sucked out loud all season long. Probably nobody a bigger disappointment outside of Florida State, which we'll get to in a minute, than Auburn. Jared Smith's coming back for the Missouri game. Obviously, Sterling Lucas invested a lot of time in this one. I think we all knew this one was probably going to go to signing day anyway. But if the Gamecocks can exercise another demon next week against Eli Drinkwitz, who is undefeated against South Carolina as a head coach going back to when he was at Appalachian State. I mean, what are the odds here?
They've kept on with him, and I think South Carolina led for a little while in the summer, and then Auburn came in and really kind of, I think kind of seized the momentum there. They had a lot of recruiting momentum in the summer, especially with some of those in-state Alabama kids, and ended up getting Jared Smith. But I think, he came in for that LSU game, and that was kind of a surprise. And I think that maybe kind of set up our radars of like, okay, we need to pay attention to this, because he had a game on Friday night and then made it to Columbia for a noon game against LSU. If there wasn't any interest, he would not have done that, but there obviously is some interest. And you have to think from Jared Smith's perspective, looking, seeing the season that Auburn's having right now, but then seeing also what South Carolina's doing with their edge guys. And it's got to be pretty attractive to, be able to play on the other side of Dylan Stewart. And for one, to see how Sterling Lucas has developed a lot of guys, but specifically Dylan Stewart, to get him ready to go that early. So I think we're going to have to see what happens with this Missouri game. He's coming in, and there's obviously a lot of interest, and I think South Carolina's got a shot here. It may be difficult just because of Jared Smith being an in-state guy at Alabama. Like, Auburn does a really good job of keeping those in-state guys, and they're going to fight all the way to the end to keep him. But Sterling Lucas has done a tremendous job in this recruitment and has built a great relationship with Jared Smith. And South Carolina's going to be in it to the end, and we'll see if they can pull off the flip.
All right, good stuff. All right, so two guys now from Greene County High School in Greensboro, Georgia, right next door to Eatonville, Georgia, and the Kilgore family.
Yep.
Not the Steve Miller Band, but Steve Miller, or Stephen Miller, 6'2", 185, safety, corner, nickel. Looks a lot like Jalen Kilgore to me. Great ball skills. He's committed to the other SC right now. Torian Gray offered him. He was at that game. He has set an official visit for the Missouri game. And his teammate, Kevin Wynn, took an unofficial visit, one of the premier defensive tackles in the country this year, 6'2", 320. Exactly what South Carolina needs in this class. Came down really to Florida State, South Carolina. He picked Florida State. I mean, what a disastrous season it has been for the semi-holes down there. They may go Tulane in 10, but Wynn keeps popping up at South Carolina games. He was back. Wouldn't shock me if he's not back for the Missouri game with his teammate. Look, I don't think anybody thinks he's signing with Florida State. According to some national guys, it looked like he was trending maybe towards the other SC, Southern Cal, but I don't even know if Lincoln Riley's going to survive it out there. I mean, he's really scuffling. And now, could both of these guys maybe be trending to the SC that is in the same time zone in which they live and only one state over?
Yeah, I mean, you have to think there's a lot of traction right there. When you think with Kevin Wynn, I'd be surprised if he ends up at Florida State. I mean, I think they've won 1-8 right now, 1-7 right now. They're just not having a good year, and he's still committed. But I think I'd be surprised if he ends up there. But I mean, he's one where Travian Robinson and him have a really strong relationship, and that's been built for a while, even before in the summer, even before that. I mean, they've built a strong relationship, and kind of keep saying it, but follow the visits with this one. I mean, it's not the short. I mean, it's not a long trip, but it's not the shortest trip to Columbia from Greene County. And I mean, he came for that LSU game, I believe, and then came back this weekend. And I think with him, you have to watch, Georgia to see what they do. I'm not sure how much interest there is there, but you have to also watch Texas and maybe Southern Cal. But I think South Carolina's put themselves in a really good spot. They got to continue to fight in this one to fight off, the other schools, but they've put themselves in a really good spot. And then with his teammate in Miller, it's kind of fascinating recruitment so far. South Carolina offered, I think, early last week. And, I mean, things have happened really fast in this recruitment with South Carolina. They offered – he immediately scheduled a visit to come for the Texas A&M game and then told Tom Lloyd with 24/7 Sports that it was, one of the best – I think maybe he said the best atmosphere that he's seen at a college – yeah, he said this is the best atmosphere I've ever seen at a college game. So, I mean, that atmosphere really resonated with him and resonated enough to where he scheduled an official visit. So – you have to think, Greene County, Georgia to Los Angeles, California, that's a long way to go play college football. And the draw to stay fairly close to home. And this guy's a really good player, too. I mean, Torian Gray doesn't offer guys that, he doesn't think can come in and play right away. I mean, we've seen that. And they really like him. And there's obviously some serious interest here for him to already schedule an official visit just a week or two after South Carolina's offered.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems like that means there's a lot of traction there.
Yeah.
Plus, I think there's the Kilgore connection. Like, he grew up watching Gerald and Jalen Kilgore play, and it seems like there's a lot of respect there for him, and it's something that he would like to do would be to play with those guys. Am I on target with that?
Yeah, I think you're right on. You hit the nail on the head. I think there is a connection there. And for a guy like Jalen to come in and play as a true freshman the way he did, obviously maybe not the same position that they'll play, but maybe so. But for them to come in and have that connection, then for Jalen to play the way he has, for Nick Murray to come in and play as a freshman and be a potential, high draft pick after this year. Like, South Carolina's got a lot to sell to Steve Miller right now. And, I don't think it'd hurt their chances if they landed one of Kevin Wynn or Steve Miller, both teammates there. And then if one commits, you have to think there'd be some traction there for, the other one to want to continue being teammates.
No doubt. So the last two guys I want to ask you about, they're not high school teammates, but they're both from Georgia, and they're both committed to the same school that is in the armpit of the East Coast, which is New Jersey. No offense to Rutgers. I've been on their campus. It's in a nice part of New Jersey, but it's still freaking New Jersey, okay? And it gets colder than a well digger's ass up there. That's what my dad used to say. But Braxton Kyle, 6'4", 315. I think he's from one of those Gwinnett schools. big defensive tackle. And then Michael Clayton, not the George Clooney character from a movie, but a really fast, sub 10, 500 meters cornerback. Also from Georgia, from Warner Robins, where my uncle used to live. South Carolina has had both on campus. Clayton is setting up a visit. What are the odds Braxton Kyle ends up setting a visit? And are they legitimate flip targets as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think with Clayton, the key is now to get him back on campus. They had him in for an unofficial earlier in the season. Now they just need to work to get him back in for an official. And, if they do, I think there's serious traction. I think there is now, but, having that official visit schedule means there legit is something there. With Braxton Kyle, he's a guy who's really been a late riser, committed to Rutgers. But now, Georgia's really in on him too. And, it goes back to, the evaluation part of it. When Georgia's offering defensive linemen, South Carolina's after the right guys too. And, you have to wonder, I think, with him, is the Georgia traction real? And is there real interest with him? But he's a really good guy, a really good player too. And a guy that, Rutgers has had for a while. And, I'm not sure if either of those guys are going to end up in Rutgers class, but Braxton Kyle's a guy. It was really big for them to get him in this weekend. They're wanting to get him in for a visit and to be able to come in and see that atmosphere. And, we'll have to kind of see, if he show back up here and for one of these next two games, either Missouri or Wofford. And if he does, there's got to be some, there's obviously something there. And, they've done a really good job putting themselves in a position to find a way to get a flip here.
So have I missed anybody?
Not in this 2025 class. I don't think so. I think we've hit them all pretty much because it's starting to wind down in this cycle. But some of the guys I've thought about here in this 2026 class that they had visited. They had Donovan Murphy visit, 2025 guy, obviously, but they had a bunch of really good 2026 wide receivers. And this past weekend, think of Travis Johnson from Vanderbilt and, Samorian Wingle from St. Augustine had some, obviously enjoyed the visit. And Ryan Mosley's got too that, Mike Furry has built a really good relationship with. So really starting to see Mike Furry's recruiting chops really starting to form because he's done what he's done with the class this year and that class next year. He's starting to build and they've got some traction with guys. And Darius Gray back in, a big offensive lineman, big target, and South Carolina just continues to be in a good spot there as well.
So how about Landon Duckworth? What's the deal with him? He had committed to Carolina. Then he got ranked the, number one dual threat quarterback in the country. Decommitted, wanted to make sure he's doing the right thing. Then all of a sudden there's a crystal ball for Central Florida. KJ Jefferson's not having a great year there. Are the Gamecocks still in it for him, or is it Jared Curtis right now?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure what they're looking, what that stands right now in the 2026 class. Obviously, Jared Curtis, there's a lot of momentum there with him. He coming off that decommitment from Georgia. There's a strong connection with Dowell Loggins there in that family. They really like Dowell Loggins, and he came in for that visit. And I'm blanking right now. I can't remember. He's got another one scheduled to South Carolina, but there's a lot of interest there. And really on Duckworth has been kind of quiet here recently as far as South Carolina and his recruitment. I'm not sure if that means, what that means, but, I haven't heard too much recently, to be honest, on Landon Duckworth. Doesn't mean that they're not in on him still, but just it's been quiet there recently.
Still a long ways to go
there,
obviously. So big game with Vanderbilt. They're ranked. I can't remember. I guess that you'd have to go back to James Franklin, and normally South Carolina always played Vanderbilt early in the season. So I don't know if South Carolina's ever played a ranked Vanderbilt team. Maybe the last time they lost to Vanderbilt was in 2008 to open the season. Bobby Johnson was the coach. That was his last year at Vanderbilt. South Carolina opened the season on a Thursday night. Up there, my good friend from high school, Gary Whitmire, came over to my condo, and we grilled steaks and watched in disgust as Kenny McKinley got hurt and the Gamecocks lost back-to-back games to Vanderbilt, 2007 and 2008. Hadn't lost yet. That's the longest winning streak South Carolina's got in the SEC over any opponent. Give me 2 or 3 keys for victory this weekend, because we talked about this off the top with John, but South Carolina at some point, defenses are not going to let you throw that little pass to Joshua Simon and let him run down the sideline for 20, 30, or 57 yards, or even 9 or 10 yards, and they're going to not let you run the ball. You're going to have to open up the pass game with somebody other than Joshua Simon or Rocket Sanders out of the backfield.
Yeah, one key is win the turnover battle in this one. Vanderbilt's a very opportunistic defense, and so is South Carolina. And when you think back to some of their games that they've won, the one Alabama, they had some turnovers. But in that Texas game, they really stayed in that Texas game because of turnovers. And key defensively is just contain Diego Pavia in that run game. If you can stop Diego Pavia and stop their early run game on 1st and 2nd down and get them to 3rd and 6 or longer, you can really let your defensive lineman get after Pavia. And I think you have to wonder how healthy Diego Pavia is. He's on the availability report right now. It's probable. And Vanderbilt's a team that's played. This will be their 6th straight game, and they haven't had a bye week since I think September 28th. And that's going to wear on any team in the SEC just with how physical the league is. So with him, just contain Diego Pavia. He's going to get out of the pocket, but stick to your receivers and coverage, because he's been really good at finding those guys out the pocket. And then offensively, kind of as you mentioned, you're going to need a wide receiver or 2 to step up in this game. I think it's big that Mazio Bennett looks to be good to go. He wasn't on the availability report, and he's right in line for a guy that could have a big game or needs to have a big game in this one. And at the same time, too, just don't get away from what worked in Texas A&M. Now, obviously, Vanderbilt's going to try to take that away, but you did a lot of really good things in the run game, especially offensive line. Like those guys played their best game, and it had a little bit was a little leaky in the pass game and pass protection, but I thought in the run game they were awesome, especially Torres Simpkins, and he got awarded for National Offensive Lineman of the Week, and rightfully so. And so just continue doing what you're doing in the run game. Open up the pass. That should help open up the pass game if you're getting some success there, and really just defensively keep doing what you're doing and get off the field on 3rd down against this team, because Vanderbilt really wants to control the ball, and they're really good at converting those 3rd downs. So you find a way to get off the field and let your offense go on the field and keep Vanderbilt's defense on the field. You got a really good chance to win this one.
So as we wrap it up here, so Brad Crawford said yesterday on the show with JC that Vandy is really beat up. Like you said, they played 6 straight games. When I looked at this game, I saw that. That's kind of part of the hope. South Carolina is a 3.5-point favorite. This is a road game, though, but South Carolina's their 2 blowout wins prior to Saturday night had been on the road at Kentucky and at Oklahoma. I know Vandy's remodeled their stadium, but I got to think there's going to be 15,000 Gamecock fans up there, maybe even more. Craig says they got 2 D linemen out. They average time of possession 32.5 minutes per game, basically, and 46.5% on 3rd down.
Yep.
Which is incredible. But they only get 337 yards a game on offense. And so Texas A&M was getting 46% conversions on 3rd down. They were 4 for 15 against this defense. With a mobile quarterback, how big of an advantage is it to have faced Jalen Milroe and Marcel from Texas A&M?
Yeah, I think it's a big advantage. And to add to that, I think it's a big advantage for South Carolina having to go against Laura Sellers in practice and Robbie Ashford. Those guys are all kind of similar in the same way. And I think more so Lenoris and Diego Pavia have more similarities, maybe a little bit more than Marcel Reed. Pavia is really – he's fast, but he's not Marcel Reed fast and kind of when he gets out in the pocket. But, he's a guy who can make things happen. But, having already going up against Jalen Milroy, and you did a pretty good job against him in that one. Then did pretty good job against Marcel Reed, but going up against guys like Norris and Robbie in practice is going to be a big advantage for these guys. And I think South Carolina's speed on defense is key in this one to slow down the option game, but also not let anything on the edges get going. Because that's what Vanderbilt's really, really good at, is kind of throwing some eye candy at you to kind of get your defense thinking and then getting out on the perimeter. But your linebackers are going to be key in this one. Demetrius Knight and his speed, Bam Martin Scott and his speed, Debo Williams and what he can do in between the tackles is what we saw this weekend. So it's going to be key for this one. I think that's one of the bigger keys in this game is, getting off the field on third down, because if you can do that, I think you got a really good chance in this one, because Vanderbilt can really hold on to that ball and bleed the clock and get this game to the fourth quarter, and anything can happen in the fourth quarter.
I mean, no doubt about it. To me, the big thing, because of how much triple option they run and then pass game off of it with Pavia, is eye discipline. I mean, I think that is going to be critical. To me, that's Debo Williams' biggest downfall. I think that's why we saw a lot of times against A&M, you saw D Knight and Bam Martin Scott out there at linebacker and not Debo, and then they bring him in for the short yardage. And he did make one big play on the short yardage. Demetrius Knight got in the wrong gap when A&M broke that long one, but that was it.
Yeah.
And but when you play against an option football team, it is about assignment football and having your eyes in the right place, to quote, getting your eyes in the right place, to quote Will Muschamp.
Yeah, if your eyes aren't in the right place, a team like Vanderbilt they'll bust a run on you with Cedric Alexander and those guys, and because they can break it easily if you're not in the spots you need to be. So I mean, that's eye discipline defensively is very key in this one, and I'm interested to see kind of how Vanderbilt handles Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart, because especially Dylan Stewart, I don't think you really want to run much option right at Dylan Stewart, because we've seen him come in and blow plays up kind of clowny like with the way he can get in there as quickly as he can. So really interested to see how Vanderbilt handles the option game with those ends, because that can make for a long night if things aren't going well for you at that end.
I think the biggest key with him is outside contain. For South Carolina's ends, you don't want to let Pavia get out of the pocket and be able to extend plays, because he is a lot like Johnny Manziel on that. So, Alex, great stuff as always. I mean, if South Carolina gets this one, that means they're getting to at least 7. If they can get Missouri, that means they're probably getting to at least 8. And to me, that means, it's one game at a time. I'm not trying to get ahead, but as a fan and as a podcaster, there's not a game left on this schedule South Carolina can't win, and I don't know that they won't be a line favorite. If they keep winning, I think they could be favored even at Clemson to end the season, if not at all.
Clemson, I'm interested to watch them against Virginia Tech this weekend, because they just did not look good against Louisville on both sides of the ball. The defense hasn't been as good, hasn't been your typical Clemson defense so far this year. And offensively, they looked like they were showing improvement, but then took a step back against Louisville. It was just not a good game. And we've seen Dabo Swinney teams kind of the same way with Shane Beamer teams that get better as the season goes on. And we'll see what they can do in Virginia Tech this weekend in Blacksburg, because Lane Stadium's not an easy place to play, as and it's going to be a big test. And I think Clemson, finds a way to come out in for a win in that one. But that Clemson South Carolina game could be really interesting if South Carolina's found a way to win their way there. And if they're not favored in that game, in that Clemson game, I think it could be a pick 'em type of game, or maybe like a 1-point favorite Clemson game if things work out that way.
Yeah, look, they weren't favored against A&M either. In fact, the line went from A&M -2.5 to -3.5, and it was still 44-20. Alex, Great stuff. Safe travels to Nashville. Always appreciate you being so gracious with your time. Be well, and we'll look forward to circling back. I think it's too early to really address the transfer portal, because we're not really going to know until December, like when guys start getting fired I don't think the portal even opens until after the signing period, right?
Yeah.
And so I know there are questions about that, but I'll say this, and I'll just ask you, don't you think with the performance of South Carolina's transfer portal guys, particularly on the offensive line and on defense, and going all the way back to Spencer Rattler and Joshua Simon, to me, South Carolina is a very attractive option for anybody that goes in the transfer portal.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you look at what they can sell defensively right now. I mean, at the edge spot, you could, with Kyle Kennard, the way he's trending, it's going to be a high draft pick. South Carolina's going to need edges in this transfer portal class. And you look at what South Carolina could sell. They could be like, look at Kyle Kennard, a guy who really under the radar when he came to South Carolina. And now look at him; he's a high draft pick. And look at how we've developed guys on defense. Look at how as you mentioned, the transfer portal guys on offense have developed. Spencer, getting a guy like him to the NFL. Guy like not a transfer, but a guy like Xavier Legette, who had a huge year and was a first-round draft pick. So South Carolina, they're going to have a lot to sell, and if things continue to go in the way they can for this season, if South Carolina continues playing well, they can sell a lot in the win column and a lot for their development.
I mean, I look at Tonka Hemingway and TJ Sanders as well. Both of those guys are going to get drafted. Hell, I've seen TJ Sanders even in the late first round, early second round of mock drafts. I mean, he's a pro. And, until DeAndre Jules got injured, I thought he might have been South Carolina's second best interior defensive lineman. They need to get him back, but certainly there'll be more on that to come. But South Carolina keeps winning with these great environments. I think they're in strong position to be knocking on the door of at least a top 15 class, not including the transfer portal.
Yeah, I mean, especially with some of those flip targets that we talked about in the high school ranks, the Kevin Wynn, Jared Smith, and Steve Miller. I mean, you find a way to flip those guys, that's only going to help your class. And who knows who some of the ones that they have currently committed may continue to rise their rankings too. So, I mean, could be an exciting end if South Carolina, continues to pull things together. It could be an exciting end to this recruiting class.
No doubt. Alex, thanks again. I've kept you too long. Appreciate you being so gracious with your time. Again, safe travels, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Awesome. Always appreciate having you on. Looking forward to next time.
All right. That is, along with Hale McGranahan and Whittle, all those guys, they work hard to bring you guys the best content. So Craig thinks it's a bad matchup for Vandy. He's going 31-13. He also mentioned the Oklahoma freshman quarterback. Well, it's really both of them are dual threat guys. I really thought it was unfair, the first kid. They booed him. I was at that game. They booed him onto the bench. But South Carolina has faced their fair share of dual threat quarterbacks. And Clayton White has done a tremendous job and has made great second half adjustments in every game, really, except the LSU game. I thought the defense kind of got on skates in that one. And after first quarter, when they flipped to the 3-3-5 and LSU started running it, I just don't think they ever had an answer. I mean, they did have a couple of fourth down stops in that one, but defense has been lights out. And guys, we have a chance for a November to remember and a big, big end to the season. But it's one game at a time. And Vandy's the biggest game of the year because they're ranked. And if you win that one, guess what? Then you are going to be ranked. I was really surprised, as my friend Brad Crawford was. South Carolina was not ranked in the college football playoff poll. My good friend Josh Pate, who is Mr. SEC, He has South Carolina ranked number 18 in his power rankings. ESPN's FPI had the Gamecocks, I think, or at least in their power rankings, 23. I mean, you just don't want to have the what ifs. You can't deal with the what ifs. But I have a feeling if South Carolina keeps winning, they're going to look back at LSU and Alabama and be like, man, if we'd have just found a way to get one of those, we'd be in the playoff. You know, maybe they don't win out. But right now, as long as Lenora Sellers is healthy, like I said off the top, it is very bad news for Gamecock opponents that the game is slowing down for him. Still need more production at wide receiver, though. Well, old Mazio, he's just going to have a big game, like Sydney, like Kenny, like Pharaoh. And so we'll see what Dow Loggins dials up for Clark Lee and Vanderbilt on Saturday. For John Whittle, for Alex Jones, and thanks to all of you guys and gals in the chat box for your participation and being on with us today. And hopefully the refs will start protecting us a little bit. Who knows? At any rate, thanks for joining us on a special day. A great show, great stuff from everybody. I'll be back tomorrow on Gamecock Pod Daily to end the week. Until then, go Cox. God bless. Be safe, everybody. I'm out of here.